Welcome, brave soul, I am the forgotten storyteller. Before we begin, tap that like button if you dare, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. And if you make it to the end of this video, I hope to see you in the next story. I hope you're ready, because I am. Let's begin. They say real horror isn't found in shadows or screams, it's in the silence between them, the long moments when everything feels wrong and no one else notices. That's how it started for Oliver. Not with a bang or a scream, but with the subtle unraveling of his best friend, quiet, persistent, invisible to everyone but him. It was like watching someone you love slowly disappear behind their own eyes. Our story today begins in the liminal quiet of suburbia, where friendships are forged in boredom and cemented in ritual, late-night Xbox matches, cheap beer on Friday nights, and hangovers at the breakfast diner. Oliver and Danny had been friends for over a decade, closer than brothers. From teenage scraps to early adulthood chaos, they had stood side by side through breakups, job losses, and an ever-growing list of questionable decisions. But over the past 18 months, something had changed, and not the kind of change you can write off as growing older or settling down. No, this was different, much darker. It started with small shifts. Danny stopped going clubbing. He ghosted on weekend plans. Their once daily texts became weekly check-ins. And whenever Oliver invited him over to hang out, Danny had an excuse lined up, like it had been pre-rehearsed. He wasn't angry, just absent. Oliver, ever the bulldog of the friendship, refused to let it go. One evening, after weeks of vague plans and flaky responses, he showed up at Danny's apartment unannounced. It smelled different, like burnt sage or incense, something earthy but off. The furniture had been rearranged, minimalized. A small, strange symbol had been drawn in chalk on the coffee table. Danny looked thinner, paler, and somehow both exhausted and at peace, like a monk living on the edge of a volcano. "Dude," Oliver asked, trying to keep his voice casual, "what the hell's been going on with you?" Danny's answer was a flat, practiced lie. "I've just been working on myself, cutting out distractions." But Oliver had known him too long to accept that. He pushed harder, insisting, needling until finally Danny caved, not in anger but with a strange, almost serene resignation, like a sinner confessing after a long fast. "About 18 months ago," Danny began, "I found this group. Online at first. Kind of a community. At the time, I was in a really dark place. You remember? I couldn't sleep, I was drinking too much, I hated everything. But these people, they helped. I started going to their meetings. They talked about cleansing, shedding the old self. After each meeting, I felt lighter. Like I was finally becoming who I was meant to be." He smiled then. Not the usual mischievous grin Oliver was used to, but something cold, reverent. The smile of a man who had been baptized in fire and survived. Oliver laughed nervously. "What is this? Like therapy? Some new age self-help group?" Danny didn't answer. He just stared ahead, like the memory of those meetings had transported him somewhere else entirely. And when Oliver asked again, when he really pushed for details, where it was and who ran it, what do they believe in, Danny shut down completely and put his walls up, eyes vacant. A few weeks passed without much contact. Oliver figured maybe Danny had just gone full granola, meditating and drinking kale smoothies or whatever, but the whole thing kept gnawing at him. Something about Danny's tone, the way he described the group, like it wasn't a club or a support group, but a religion. Then one Saturday night, Oliver got a text. "You should come to a meeting. Just once. See what it's about." No punctuation. No emoji. Just the sterile, clinical invite of someone trying to recruit. Oliver stared at the screen for a long time. Something inside him screamed to say no. But curiosity, the same instinct that had gotten him into trouble since high school. "Yeah, sure," he replied. "Why not?" The next night, Danny picked him up. The car ride was awkward. Danny didn't speak much, and when he did, it was to make vague statements like, "You'll understand once you're there," or "They help you see what's real." They drove for nearly 2 hours, leaving behind the glittering noise of the city for backroads and empty farmland. The sky turned purple, then black. Eventually, they pulled up to a dilapidated farmhouse surrounded by dense trees. There were no streetlights, no nearby houses, just the thick, unnatural quiet of isolation. Oliver chuckled uneasily. "What is this, some Blair Witch shit?" Danny didn't answer. He just got out of the car and motioned for Oliver to follow. The inside of the farmhouse was dimly lit by flickering lanterns and a few strategically placed candles. The air was thick with incense, sweet and pungent, like a mix of cloves and rot. The walls were adorned with symbols Oliver didn't recognize, sharp, angular runes that made his skin crawl. There were others inside. About 20 people, all in identical gray robes. Their faces were calm, almost too calm. Some greeted Danny with a nod. Others simply stared at Oliver, their expressions unreadable. A tall man with jet black hair and piercing eyes stepped forward. He wore no robe, just a simple black suit. Something about his presence was magnetic and suffocating all at once. He smiled. "Welcome, brother," the man said. "We're so glad you've come." Oliver hesitated. "Yeah, Danny invited me." The man's smile widened. "Yes, he did. You must be very special." Before Oliver could respond, the lights dimmed further. The group formed a circle. The chanting began, low and rhythmic, in a language that twisted in Oliver's ears. It didn't sound human. It was guttural, ancient, something that bypassed logic and clawed straight into the animal part of the brain. He turned to Danny. "What is this?" he whispered. Danny just stared ahead, lips moving with the chant, face blank. Then hands grabbed Oliver from behind. Oliver struggled instinctively, his voice cracking as he shouted, "Hey, what the hell is this?" But the hands didn't let go. They were firm, practiced, and many of them. He was dragged deeper into the house, down a narrow hallway where the wooden floor groaned beneath every step. The flickering candlelight didn't help the growing nausea in his gut. His feet scuffed against the warped floorboards as he kicked and twisted, trying to break free, but there were too many of them and they were all too calm. The silence in their expressions was more terrifying than violence would have been. There was no anger, no rush, just ritual. The hallway opened into a room that should never have existed in a farmhouse. It was tall, the ceiling sloped into an arch, and the walls were covered in ancient symbols etched into decaying wood. Candles lined the perimeter, their flames shivering like they were afraid to be here. In the center stood an altar, stone, cracked, old, too old. Next to it was a small wooden table with a silver dagger glinting under the candlelight. Oliver's breath caught in his throat. No, no, no. This isn't happening. They lifted him onto the altar. Cold stone met his back as the warmth was yanked from his limbs. Someone pulled his arms and legs down, stretching him out like a sacrifice in a painting. And then ropes. Old, rough, coarse ropes tied him down. He kicked, he writhed, but the bindings were tight. His chest rose and fell in panic bursts, and then he saw him. His best friend Danny. Standing just a few feet away. Not helping, not even moving. He was just watching. "Danny?" Oliver screamed, his voice sharp with betrayal. "Help me, man. What are you doing?" Danny didn't blink. His face was frozen, a lifeless mask. His eyes had no recognition. Oliver might as well have been a stranger. Then the leader stepped forward again, now holding a small black book in his hand. His voice carried a weight that made the air feel thicker. "Tonight, the vessel is opened." The others began chanting. That same primal, twisted language. Louder now. Oliver shook his head violently. "This is insane. You're all sick. Danny, please." But Danny still didn't respond. The cult leader approached the table, lifting the dagger with both hands. Its blade shimmered unnaturally, like it pulsed with something not of this world. He stood over Oliver, eyes closing in reverence. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Through this gift, we are reborn." And then, just before the dagger fell, something happened. A candle exploded. Not a burst of flame, but like something invisible had slammed into it. It shattered, sending sparks across the floor. One spark caught onto the frayed edge of a curtain. In seconds, fire crawled up the wall, orange and angry. The chanting wavered. A few people broke the circle in confusion. The leader spun around, yelling something in the ancient tongue. Oliver, seizing the moment, yanked with everything he had. The ropes had slackened just slightly, likely due to the distraction. He twisted his wrist hard against the edge of the altar. His skin tore and blood spilled. But the pain was nothing compared to what was coming. The rope snapped. His right hand was free. Oliver didn't think, he acted. He grabbed the rope around his other wrist, yanking until it unraveled. The fire spread fast, now licking the ceiling. Smoke curled into the ritual chamber, thick and choking. A cultist noticed and lunged, but Oliver punched him square in the jaw. The man dropped like a sack of bricks. Oliver leapt from the altar, legs weak, vision spinning, but adrenaline was in control now. He ran, blinded by smoke, disoriented and coughing. The house was a labyrinth of flickering shadows and screaming cultists trying to put out the fire. Somewhere in the chaos, he saw Danny again, just standing there, watching it all burn like a ghost inside his own body. Oliver didn't stop to say anything this time. He just ran. The police didn't believe him at first, not all of it. Cults in old farmhouses, ancient languages, human sacrifices? Sounded like a bad movie. But when they investigated the property the next morning, the house was charred and still smoldering, but the evidence remained. Symbols scorched into walls, burned remnants of robes, and the altar, half melted from the heat, but unmistakable in design. They found Danny along with 3 others wandering in the nearby woods. They were all dazed and silent, as if waking from a dream they hadn't fully exited. The cult leader, known by his followers only as the Shepherd, was finally arrested 2 days later. His real name was revealed to be Michael Thorne, and he was already a person of interest in another case, an open missing persons file involving a teenage girl who vanished 3 years ago in a different state. A similar cult, a similar altar. That girl was never found. Thorne refused to speak during interrogation, but the look in his eyes told detectives everything. He wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Danny and the others were charged as accomplices. Some were tried. Some were sent to psychiatric facilities. Danny was given 10 years without parole. Time passed. The news moved on. The farmhouse was demolished. But Oliver never really recovered. He'd wake up at night to the sound of that chanting. Sometimes he'd see Danny in his dreams, standing over him with the same empty stare, the dagger gleaming in hand. He moved cities, changed his number, tried to forget. But trauma doesn't follow linear time. It loops, it waits. And then, 3 years later, the letter arrived. A plain envelope. No return address. Just his name handwritten in tight, neat script. Inside, a folded letter. The paper smelled like mildew and ink. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Danny's. Oliver, I remember everything now. Not all at once. Came back in flashes at first. Faces. Screams. Your voice. But now it's all there and I can't erase it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this. But I need you to know, I was awake during the ritual. I was inside myself. But I was trapped and watching. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. I don't know what they did to me. I don't know if I'll ever be free. But you saved me. Even if it doesn't feel like it. Even if it cost you more than I can repay. I'm sorry. For everything. Danny. Oliver sat with the letter for hours. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stared. That night, he tucked it into a drawer and went to bed. And across the street, under a flickering street lamp, a figure stood watching his window. Oliver awoke the next morning with the strange, lingering sense that someone had been inside his dreams, but not as a presence, more like a shadow burned into his memory. Something stood just beyond the edges of his subconscious, breathing softly, patiently. He chalked it up to the letter, to Danny, to the past clawing its way back in through the cracks. He tried to dismiss the feeling of being watched as paranoia. But when he looked outside, he noticed faint impressions in the dew-covered grass across the street, right where the figure had stood the night before. 2 shoe prints, deep ones, as if someone had just stood there, watching. 4 hours. He didn't report it. He wasn't sure he could explain it in a way that didn't sound insane. Instead, he told himself what everyone tells themselves when the horror starts to return. It's nothing. It's over. But Oliver knew better. You don't walk away from something like that untouched. Even if you escape the knife, something else stays with you. A residue. A presence. It wasn't just trauma. It was like the cult had carved a hole in him and something had followed him through. He began seeing things. It started small, reflections that didn't match. In the mirror, Danny would be behind him, expression blank. He'd blink and it would be gone. His television would switch itself on at night, flashing static before settling on a frozen image. The altar, the dagger, the black-eyed shepherd whispering in a language that made no sound. Then came the whispers. At first, he thought it was the neighbors, thin walls, old pipes. But the words weren't English. They weren't anything at all. They scraped at his skull like rusted metal dragging across a chalkboard. The same guttural chant from the farmhouse, looping like a cursed lullaby. Always at 3:33 a.m. He stopped sleeping. He tried therapy, medication, even sleep studies. Nothing worked. Because it wasn't in his head. It was outside watching, waiting. And then came the worst part. Danny's voice. Not in the letter. Not a memory. In his apartment. Oliver, let me in. That first night, Oliver was in bed, heart pounding in sync with the rain tapping against the window. The voice came through the door like a breeze, low and pleading. He froze. Oliver, I remember more. I need to tell you. He got up slowly, barefoot, holding a baseball bat. His apartment was dark, save for the pale glow of streetlights slicing through the blinds. He approached the door, looked through the peephole. No one was there. He stood frozen for minutes, the bat trembling in his hand. Then the voice came again. "Oliver, I never left." The whispers grew louder in the following days, filling his walls, his thoughts, his dreams. The boundaries between sleep and waking dissolved. Reality became loose and foggy. He saw Danny in every crowd, the shepherd's eyes in every stranger. He found the same symbol from Danny's coffee table burned into his ceiling above his bed, even though he'd never drawn it. Then he found the second letter, tucked under his pillow. "You've been marked, Oliver. You think you escaped, but that was only the beginning. The shepherd isn't in prison anymore. They're coming back. And this time they need more than a sacrifice. They need a vessel. And you're perfect." He dropped the letter like it had stung him. He checked the locks, boarded the windows and bought cameras, moved apartments. It didn't help. Everywhere he went, the feeling followed. Like being watched with eyes you can't see, and then came the whispers. The scent of incense in hallways he'd never entered. He went to the police, but they found nothing. No intrusions. No records of the shepherd's release. Then one night, in a diner on the edge of town, Oliver saw a face he hadn't seen in years, one of the cultists from that night. A girl, younger than most. She looked very pale. Her eyes looked like two bottomless wells, still reflecting firelight. She was just sitting there, alone, eating pie, smiling. He stood frozen. She didn't approach, just watched. He left his meal uneaten and ran. The dreams changed after that. They became prophetic. He dreamt of fire, cities burning, people chanting in streets. The cult had grown, rebuilt itself. And this time they didn't need secrecy. They had found a way to hide in plain sight, through tech, through media, through community groups that promised enlightenment but practiced control. The shepherd was out. Oliver didn't know how or when, but the dreams were clear. He was building something, preparing. And then came the final sign. A knock at the door. 3 short taps. It sounded familiar, almost rhythmic. Oliver didn't move, didn't breathe. Another knock, then a voice. "Oliver, please let me in." "It's Danny." He swallowed hard, approached the door slowly. "I'm sorry for everything, but you need to know they're already here. You don't have time." He looked through the peephole again. No one. But the whisper came again, right behind his ear this time. "They're already inside you." Oliver screamed. He stumbled backward, tripping over the couch, crashing to the floor. And in that moment, something clicked. The dreams, the whispers, the voice, the hallucinations. He hadn't escaped at all. The ritual wasn't about death. It was about transformation. They hadn't wanted to kill him. They'd wanted to mark him, make him a seed, a carrier, a vessel. The cult hadn't failed that night. It had begun. Oliver didn't remember falling asleep, but he woke up soaked in sweat, the scream still lodged in his throat like a knife. His apartment was dark and quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears until it starts to sound like static. His heart was still racing. It took him a moment to realize the television was on, blaring white noise even though he hadn't touched the remote in days. He reached for it, fumbling in the dark, and then, just before he turned it off, the static cut to an image. The altar. Not a recreation, the altar. From the farmhouse. Same cracks. Same candlelit room. Except now it was pristine, clean, polished, glowing faintly with unnatural light. The camera, or whatever was recording, zoomed slowly toward it and then panned to the side. And there, bound in rope, eyes wide with terror, was him. Oliver recoiled, stumbling away from the TV. The image flickered. Then the screen went black. The remote fell from his hands, clattering on the floor. This wasn't just PTSD. It wasn't delusion. It wasn't paranoia. Something was bleeding through. The cult had done something to him that night, something more than a failed sacrifice. They had opened a door, and he had never closed it. He started researching cults, obsessively. Reddit threads, conspiracy blogs, police reports, anything he could find. The shepherd's name, Michael Thorne, had been scrubbed from official records. News articles about his arrest had been archived or mysteriously lost in site migrations. The only things left were old forums, grainy screenshots, and vague anecdotes from people claiming to be ex-members or survivors of his awakening programs. All of them describe the same core beliefs. To burn the ego is to find the soul. To give the flesh is to free the mind. One will awaken the rest. That last one stuck with Oliver. One will awaken the rest. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a trigger. The cult didn't need to find people anymore. They had planted a seed inside him. Something that would spread. Maybe through dreams. Maybe through words. Maybe just through proximity. But the whispers weren't just haunting him anymore. He noticed it in people around him, neighbors muttering strange phrases under their breath. A cashier at the grocery store handing him change and smiling just a little too long. A coworker humming a melody that matched the cult's chanting exactly. They were waking up, but they were doing so through him. And then came the final message. Another letter. Burned around the edges. No envelope this time, just slipped under his door like a secret. The shepherd calls. You are the first fire. Come home. We want you here tonight. Oliver didn't sleep that night. Instead he drove. All night. Without a destination. Back roads and highways. Just moving, trying to outrun the feeling in his chest that something terrible was about to break free. Around 3 a.m. he pulled over at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. The clerk didn't look up as he entered. The place smelled like mildew and hot rubber. He grabbed a coffee, paid, and turned to leave, then froze. Outside, parked next to his car, was a black van. No license plate, no windows, and in the driver's seat, a man wearing gray robes. And he was smiling. Not at him, but through him. Oliver backed into the store, nearly knocking over a rack of sunglasses. Call the fucking cops, he told the clerk. The man looked up, confused. What? That van, he's been following me. Call the police. Please. The clerk stepped to the window, glanced outside, and frowned. There's no van out there. Oliver's heart dropped. He ran outside. Nothing. No van. No tire tracks. Just his car. Sitting there. The next morning he made a decision. He couldn't run anymore. If he was the spark, the fire needed to be put out from the inside. He had to go back to where it started. The farmhouse was gone, but the land remained. He drove there as the sun set, expecting the place to feel barren and broken. Instead, it looked alive. New construction. A sleek, modern building now stood where the ruins had once been, glass and wood, minimalist in design, as if built by some spiritual wellness company. A sign stood at the front. The Dawn Collective. Awaken to your better self. Oliver's stomach turned. They'd rebranded. They had gone public. He walked in without hesitation. The receptionist smiled warmly. Welcome, sir. Are you here for the awakening ceremony? He nodded. She handed him a pamphlet. You're just in time. Follow the lighted path. He did. The hallway was long. White walls. Quiet music. At the end was a door. He stepped through, and into a room he recognized instantly. The altar had returned. Polished. Revered. New dagger. Same energy. And around it stood a circle of people in gray robes. At the center of them was Danny. Eyes clear. Face calm. Smiling, not blankly this time, but warmly. I knew you'd come, he said. Oliver froze. Danny stepped closer. You're not the seed anymore. You're the soil. The shepherd showed me. We all grow through you now. Oliver wanted to run, to scream. But something inside him ached. A deep, resonant pain, like remembering a name you forgot you had. The cult began to chant. Not the same words. They were chanting his name. Over and over. Softly like a prayer. Oliver, Oliver, Oliver. Danny offered him the dagger. You can stop running. Just give in. Let it all go. Oliver raised the blade. For a moment, just a breath, he considered it. He could end it. And the noise. The visions. The fire. But then he looked at Danny, really looked, and saw not peace but possession. A soul caged inside a body still pretending to be human. No, he whispered, and turned the blade. Not inward. He lunged for the candles. Knocked them into the drapes. Fire erupted immediately, this time by his hand. The circle screamed. Danny lunged, but Oliver shoved him back. The room became chaos, smoke and fire and chanting breaking into howls. He ran. Through flame and through the screams. And didn't stop until he saw stars in the sky again. The flames behind Oliver reached high into the sky, orange tongues licking at the stars as if trying to consume the heavens themselves. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The fire was his exorcism. The final purge. Or at least, that's what he told himself as he collapsed by the roadside miles from the new Dawn Collective compound, lungs raw, skin slick with sweat and ash. Somewhere behind him, the cult burned, for the second time. But deep down, Oliver knew what he had really done. Fire doesn't cleanse what lives in shadows. It only sends it deeper underground. The authorities arrived hours later. Reports of a forest fire, possible arson, and suspicious activity at the new wellness center drew immediate attention. But once again, when the police searched the scorched ruins, there were no bodies. No signs of people. Just the smoldering remains of a building that was never officially registered under any name connected to Michael Thorne. As for Danny, he was long gone. Not arrested. Not found. Not confirmed dead. Just gone. No digital footprint. No records. No trace. It was as if the fire had burned away his existence as well. Months passed. Oliver went dark. No social media, no phone, no job. He moved again, this time to a small coastal town with more fog than people, hoping the waves and distance would muffle whatever lingering echoes still pulsed through his veins. But nothing stays buried forever. The dreams returned first. Not the usual fragmented nightmares of chanting and fire, but vivid memories of the ritual, except now they had changed. In his dreams he stood at the altar. He wore the robes. The cult knelt around him, chanting his name, not as a victim but as a god. And in the back of the dream stood Danny, smiling. Always just smiling. The final letter came on the 1-year anniversary of the fire. He found it wedged into his apartment door. No return address. Just a wax seal with the cult's spiral symbol pressed into it. He hesitated before opening it, hands trembling, heart tight. It was handwritten, same neat style as before. But this time it wasn't from Danny. We knew you would resist. It was necessary. Some vessels crack before they pour. But the fire did not consume you, Oliver. It revealed you. You are not our enemy. You are our beginning. The shepherd. That was when he knew. The ritual had succeeded. Not in blood but in symbol. Not in death but in rebirth. He hadn't stopped anything. He had become it. A conduit. A flame passed from eye to eye, word to word, dream to dream. He hadn't just escaped the cult. He'd carried it out with him, like a virus embedded in his spirit. And now it was growing. Quietly. Everywhere. He began to notice people watching him again. Not fearfully, but reverently. Strangers would nod at him like they recognized something ancient in his face. Children would stop crying when he entered the room. Dogs would lower their heads in submission. It didn't matter what town he moved to. The followers were already there. Waiting. One night, he caught his reflection in the mirror. But it didn't match. The man looking back at him was calm and serene. Eyes wide but empty. Lips slightly parted as if whispering prayers. He punched the mirror so hard it cracked down the center. But the reflection kept staring, unbothered. He hadn't escaped. He had awakened. Now he lives quietly, out of sight, avoiding large crowds, avoiding himself. But sometimes in quiet moments he feels the pulse of it, beneath his skin, in his teeth, behind his eyes. Like a tide just waiting to rise. He doesn't talk to people anymore. He can't. Because when he does, they start dreaming too. And if you're hearing this story, if these words have taken root in your thoughts, if you've ever woken up at 3:33 a.m. to a whisper with no mouth, if you've ever looked in a mirror and thought, that's not me anymore, then maybe, just maybe, you've heard the call too. And the fire is already inside you. Let us know in the comments, if you were Oliver, would you have gone back to try and stop it all? Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts? Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare,